publicly stated that I use cocaine. I do not. Jake, you never responded to the challenge.
Dana, I accepted every part of your challenge.
I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids.
Ready, baby, let's go.
The story of Jake Paul versus Dana White is one of the strangest rivalries in modern combat sports. It's not a fight in the cage, and it's not a war in the ring. It's louder, it's dirtier, and at times, it's been more personal than any face-off in UFC history. It all started when Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned boxer, began picking fights with the biggest names in the UFC. He wasn't calling out prospects.
You're calling out Jorge Masvidal because he's a pay-per-view superstar. Nate Diaz.
He wanted the biggest stars Dana White had under contract. Conor McGregor, Jorge Masvidal, Nate Diaz. And every time Jake opened his mouth,
I would fight Masvidal in MMA. Steroid test me whenever the fuck you want. It is 2 weeks after my fight, and I am a fat bitch. I don't do steroids, and I take it as a compliment. Because
away from Dana's fighters, and onto a kid from Ohio who had barely laced up gloves a few years earlier. For Dana White, it was infuriating. Here was a man outside of the UFC, building pay-per-views, raking in millions, and trashing the promotion while doing it.
There's no other excuse to me knocking out all of your champions than this kid does steroids.
And Dana did what Dana always does when threatened. He fired back. The tension exploded when Dana White publicly hinted that Jake Paul was on performance enhancers.
I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids.
That clip spread across MMA media like wildfire. Jake Paul, who had poured millions into building his brand as a legitimate fighter, saw it not as trash talk, but as slander. He shot back immediately, accusing Dana of lying to protect his own empire. To Jake, Dana's words weren't just insults. They were an attack on his credibility, his business, and his career. From there, the rivalry snowballed. Dana dismissed Jake as a circus act. Jake turned the tables, hammering Dana on the one issue UFC fighters have complained about for years: fighter pay. He released videos exposing fighter salaries, comparing them to boxing purses, and challenging Dana to prove him wrong. Pay your fighters, Dana, Jake demanded.
Fighters, all of them, they can't say shit because you'll just bench them. You met your maker. I'm not gonna stop. Well,
you're too stupid.
A line that became a rallying cry across social media. But Dana wasn't done. Appearing on Logan Paul's Impulsive podcast, he mocked the Paul brothers for threatening lawsuits, saying Jake was the last person who should cry foul about trash talk. Fans laughed. The clip went viral, but behind the scenes, Jake Paul doubled down. He threatened real legal action against the UFC boss, putting defamation lawsuits on the table. The feud was no longer just internet banter. It was spilling into boardrooms and legal offices. If you're enjoying this breakdown of combat sports' most controversial rivalries, make sure to subscribe to MMA Arena. We go deep into the stories the mainstream won't touch. As the back and forth grew nastier, fans began taking sides. Hardcore UFC loyalists backed Dana White, dismissing Jake as a clout chaser. But many boxing fans and even some UFC fighters quietly supported Paul. After all, stars like Francis Ngannou, John Jones, and Jorge Masvidal had all clashed with Dana over money. For them, Jake Paul wasn't just an outsider throwing stones. He was saying what they had been saying all along. The media circus was relentless. Every new interview became a headline. Dana called Jake a pay-per-view flop.
You can't sell pay-per-views. You're calling out.
Jake responded by posting videos showing UFC fighters' purses compared to his own. Each side escalated. Each side raised the stakes. And the more they went at it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just Paul versus White. This was boxing versus MMA. Independent promotion versus the UFC machine. And underneath it all, the real issue was power. Dana White controls matchmaking, contracts, and paychecks. He decides who fights and when. But Jake Paul, he thrives on chaos. He built his empire by taking control away from promoters and putting it directly into his own hands. Their clash was inevitable because they both lived on control, and neither man was willing to give it up. The rivalry also forced fans to confront some uncomfortable truths. How was a YouTuber with fewer than 10 professional fights making more money per bout than UFC champions with a decade of experience? How was Jake Paul mocked as a sideshow, managing to shine a light on issues that elite fighters had been screaming about for years? Tactically, Jake knew what he was doing. He didn't just attack Dana personally, he attacked the UFC's brand. He highlighted fighter protests, sponsorship disputes, and drug testing controversies. By going after the system, he positioned himself not as a troll, but as a disruptor. Dana, meanwhile, tried to discredit Paul by painting him as a fraud, someone who built a career off manufactured beefs and easy matchups. The back and forth created a cultural storm. UFC press conferences couldn't escape questions about Jake Paul. Fighters were asked to pick sides. Fans debated whether Jake was a hero or a clown. And every time Dana tried to dismiss him, Paul found a way to make the headlines even bigger. This feud has never been about fists. It's been about narrative. Dana White built the UFC on controlling the story, deciding who's valuable, who gets pushed, who becomes a star. Jake Paul has made a career out of ripping that control away. And in the end, that's what makes this rivalry so explosive. Because no matter how you feel about Jake Paul, love him or hate him, he managed to drag the most powerful man in MMA into a fight Dana never wanted. A fight outside the cage. A fight that exposed cracks in the UFC's empire. And a fight that proved once again that in combat sports, the most dangerous opponent isn't always the one standing across from you in the ring.